Walk back into time, brother.
Brother, this is breathtaking. I mean, the mindset of 5,000 years ago, where the brothers' minds had to be at, is incredible. Just the thought.
As I said before, Imhotep, the multi-genius, long before Michelangelo, long before Thales, long before Pythagoras. This is the African that built this step pyramid right here for his pharaoh, King Zoser, in the third dynastic period, almost 5,000 years ago in the old dynastic kingdom. But yet we are told, our children are told, that Hippocrates was the father of medicine. How could Hippocrates be the father of medicine when Imhotep was a physician in his time? Architect, engineer, who studied the stars, who gave us the circumference of the earth by studying the winter solstice and the summer solstice, long before some Aristophanes, who we are told gave us the circumference of the earth. This is the story that they don't want us to know, and will do everything possible to deny it. And wait till we get to the museum to show you the extent what they will do to deny this. But here we see he built this pyramid for Zoser, a good picture of him right here. Of course you see his nose knocked off. You see, everything was done to deny the African spiritual ancestral story. And in the back of this step pyramid is the serdab, as I mentioned before, so you can look back at Zoser in the time, for he will look back at you and thank you for coming back. And you also got to go back and tell other brothers and sisters, don't go to France, don't go to England, go back to the land of your ancestors. Come back here. And they put it all here for us to see. And that's, like I said before, that's why you're back here. And this is just a start of our journey. So let's go to the serdab. You see our footprints from last year? You see my footprints from last year? Again, as you know, that I was talking about the spiritual ascension into the spiritual realm, and that is displayed on everything that you see is our ancestral astral projection and cosmic connection, leading the terrestrial into the celestial universe. This was something that was always part of us. So here you see this, what is called a serdab, and Zoser Neterket is inside, looking out from his world into this world for his spirit to transcend and to astral project, for his Sahu to transcend time and space. That's what this is all about. So you see his spirit traveling into the spiritual realm, brothers and sisters. So our ancestors are constantly connected to the past, the present, and also the future, which is the spiritual realm. Look into the holes right here and tell me what you see. And what's he doing?
He's looking back at me.
He's looking back at you. Looking back from the world from the past of our ancestors to the world of the present, showing that it was two realms. Our ancestors did not have a concept of death.
Brothers and sisters, you have just witnessed one of the rare sights that will be shown by our tour guide, Ashra Kwesi. Let's now go to the Pyramid of Unas, where he'll show us the world's first religious text carved in stone.
Try to grasp where you are. In Unas's pyramid right here, where he built in the 5th dynastic period. And this was known as the pyramid text. We know the coffin text. We see that there were many writings of our ascension into heaven. Some of the earliest writings known in Per-em-Heru, that Wallace Budge translated to the Book of the Dead. Why was Wallace Budge calling it the Book of the Dead? When they came in and robbed the tombs, they were actually taking the scrolls out of our ancestors' hands, and they said the Book of the Dead because they were robbing from the dead. That's how it became Book of the Dead. But in the pyramid text at Unas right here, it's about his ascension into heaven. See the stars up above? Yes. So, how could this be looked at as pagan and heathen? The only way this is going to be looked at as pagan and heathen for you to denounce this, but this is the origin of our spirit called the Sahu, the spiritual body to ascend into heaven. Keep in mind, are we grasping the time period? Yes. Over 4,000 years ago, the Sahu, the spiritual body of Unas, ascending into heaven. Astrotheology, as we call it today, spiritual realm. This was his sacred sarcophagus out of granite stone. This granite stone we're going to see when we go into Upper Egypt and Aswan, where they quarried the hardest stone. This is where the king's chamber was made out of hard granite stone in the sarcophagus of Unas.
Is that the tomb?
This is the actual tomb of Unas, where he was buried at. Of course, his sacred site has been desecrated. His body has been desecrated. His tomb has been ravaged by the tomb robbers who come in. But let me see you go to Europe and dig up some ancient sacred burial sites of Europeans and see how far you go. because if it belonged to Europeans, they wouldn't desecrate it. The vendors and everybody made it to the Temple of Aset. As Temple of Aset is called today, the Temple of Isis, and beautiful as Isis is the time of Ra. Now keep in mind that this temple, although it's on Angelica Island, although it's still called the Island of Philae, it was restructured as we have been talking about and rebuilt on this temple right here. But this is one of the last temples. This was one of the last places where our ancestors kept alive the tradition of the Osirian drama and the resurrection of Asar. But as the Byzantine Romans took over, as we know that Theodosius, and we also know that in the 4th century AD and Justinian in the 6th century AD, they did everything to try to chisel out the Madonna and Child. They tried to chisel out the spiritual stories that were told as our ancestors wrote them on the books in stone. But as we see that these stories were told, we can see it was incorporated into the Western version of Christianity as the Madonna and Child. When the Ptolemies took over, like Ptolemy, where he called himself the new Dionysus, literally means the new Osiris, okay? So they were literally copying every concept directly from the Kemetic Nile Valley civilization spirituality. And as I talked about the Doric, I talked about the Corinthian, I talked also about the various columns that our ancestors had, the Tuscan and the Corinthian and so forth. You can see all those columns as you look down here. You see the Western architecture was taken from here. So if you were to go to the Parthenon and see these architectural structures, where did it originate from? It originated right here. Now the island behind you is Bigger Island. When we were at Abydos, and being at Abydos, we talked about how that's where Asar's head was buried, right? That we called Abtu, because his body was cut up by his evil brother named Set, and cut up into 14 pieces and thrown into the River Nile. So his body was spread throughout the land, so all over Kemet, a piece of his body. This is significant for us, because there's a connection to us, as I talked to some of you about Abydos. As we see Asar's body was cut up in different pieces, we as an African people were cut up. We were taken from the African continent and spread throughout the world. As we are on this Kemet New Know Thyself educational tour, some of us come from Canada, is that right? Canada's in the house? All right, well, speak up, Holly. All right, some of us come from England, is that right? We were cut up and brought to England. Some of us from the Caribbean, is that right? All right, some of us from Jamaica. South America. Some of us from South America, and many of us are from the states, northeast, south, and west. So we come from all these different areas. We were systematically cut up and spread throughout the world. And then not only that, our identity was taken away, so we didn't see ourselves as Africans anymore. We only saw ourselves as either Americans or Jamaicans or from the British or so forth, or from the Canadians and so forth. But at the same time, when the French, when they took a part of Africa, did they change their names? They called it French West Africa. So they still kept with their identity to show the global power of their white supremacy by keeping the identity of their name. Now, what would happen if African people kept our nationalistic and our identity together, no matter where we are, whether we be in England, whether we be in Jamaica, whether we be in Canada, whether we be in South America, whether we be in America? Imagine if we all kept it under that African power. Then that would be the African power to coming together. So just like Asar was cut up into 14 pieces, it was Aset who reconstructed his body and brought his body back together again. So it's the African woman. The womb of the African woman is going to bring us back together and resurrect us as a people. That's why systematically, okay, the Ashkenazis who control the networks make sure that the young people call her bees to desecrate the sacred womb. Whereas if we knew the sacred womb, we would bow down to that womb, knowing that that is the salvation and the resurrection of African people. When you get up into the relief, you're going to see a set. The Temple of Aset, brothers and sisters, and behind you, if you can look very closely, you can see how Aset was chiseled out. I said to you yesterday, she was chiseled out, but notice that the sun was not chiseled out. Why is it that the sun is not chiseled out? Because we still go to church on Sunday, because we can still go to church on Sunday and have sunrise service, so they're here, they're still deifying the sun. But you're truly the children of the sun, because Ra has kissed you from the dawn of time. But that area, you see the Aset throne on top of the sun, symbolizing that that is Aset. So when Theodosius and Justinian came here in the 4th and 6th century AD, they are the ones who closed this temple down. Not only did they close it down, but they also started to plagiarize many ideas from this temple where it ended up in the Western world. For instance, you see the Ark of Aset that you see right behind me. It's from here where the Ark was taken out from the Holies of the Holies, and the priests, the Kari head priests at this time were called the Pastori. That's where the Western world got the term pastor from. Because during this time of the Ptolemies, these were the Pastori priests who carried the Ark over to that island called Bigger Island. As I showed you right here, the same idea, where the carrying of the Ark of the Black Madonna in France, as I said before, this temple, as I repeated again, was named after this temple right here, Père Aset, later became Paris, France, and the Notre Dame temple was copied from here. And you see the Ark right here, where they still have, at this time, Mary being black and Jesus being black. Look at the white men carrying the Ark of Mary, which was no other than a takeoff of the Ark of Isis that you see right here on the temple from the original Opet festival, showing where the priest took Isis' Ark to go and meet her husband Osiris. At this time, they still had Mary as black. She was not white here, showing the procession that they have in Europe that was originally copied from African people. And keep in mind, it was St. Luke is the one who made the first Mary as being black. That was St. Luke. And the back part of the Mimizi house, which is the birthing house, you will see the goddess Aset. And here's the goddess Aset right here, but you'll notice that she's chiseled out. What makes the Italian, European Madonna and Child more sacred than yours when you had it first? She was called the Theotokos. What is the Theotokos? She was called the Mother of God. She was worshipped all over Europe, known as the Herculean worship of the goddess Aset. So here we see an ancient spiritual story passed down through the millenniums, and we have no idea that its origin started right here, but yet this one is supposed to be so pagan and so heathen. Well, if it was supposed to be so pagan and so heathen, why would they copy the same exact idea of the Madonna and Child? Right. So here's where the original story began at, brothers and sisters. So that's what we're trying to reveal to you. These things are not told to these groups who are coming up in here. They're not telling her about the original goddess right here where it all began, where she was de-Africanized at the conference of Ephesus in 431 AD. You need to study those ecumenical conferences, because it's at those ecumenical conferences where they literally copied this from. That's why they're more interested in what I'm saying over there, looking at you, because we're over here telling the truth. They're not even paying no attention to their guide over there. All right? Now let's go up into the Mimizi house. Sorry. We have to line up like this here. Brothers and sisters, again, we want to show you some reliefs. It took me years coming here studying these reliefs on the temples. Thank you, sister. And seeing where many of the concepts were literally taken from African people. Keep in mind when Theodosius and Justinian came in to Africa, for many years they came in as plunderers of this temple right here. And why did they close it down? As I said before, they closed it down because they were stealing many of their theological concepts right up out of Africa. And that's what we want to deal with right here. Now here we have Isis, as our ancestors called her Aset, with her holy child. Why did they chisel it out? Justinian is the one who closed this temple down, where many of our Nubian brothers and sisters used this temple and saw Isis and Horus as sacred until the coming of Justinian, where they closed it down to forbid our brothers and sisters to worship the first Madonna and Child. The first Trinity came directly from African people. Why did they chisel it out? Because you were on this temple. And here she is right here. Now, this is the African goddess that goes back 4,100 years BC to Madonna and Child. You see her lactating the holy child Horus right here. This was the African goddess that had to be chiseled out. And sister, you come over here for a second. Come right on over here for a second. All right? Do we see something here? Yes. This goddess here was our soul, was our spirit. And that's what had to be eradicated to start the spiritual enslavement of African people. So the stopping of the worshiping the goddess was literally the stopping of the worshiping of our women, our children, and us as an African family. That's why they came in and tried to hack her out, as you see on the reliefs right here. Coming back for an eye. Now that's Wallace Budge, talking about your African ancestral history. Now let's break it down. On this relief, brothers and sisters, you can see many concepts where they came in, as I said, like scavengers and picked different pieces. On this particular relief, you can see where the Western world through Judaism took a piece of a concept of the creation story from. You can see where the Greek philosophers took a concept of Greek philosophy from. And you can also see where Christianity took a concept, European Christianity took a concept from. So let's break it down. Again, carved in stone on the temple of Aset, right here on the island of Philae. It is here. It tells where the Western world literally came like scavengers and took various scenes to make up the Western world. And one of those scenes is we see that Hermes Trismegistus in Greek mythology, they literally took it from Tahuti. It is here that our ancestors had a study from the 42 books of Tahuti, representing science, law, and intelligence, who was represented as the ibis bird that you saw. We saw those little white birds that we saw come over here. So our ancestors looked at nature. We didn't worship the bird, but it was an attribute of science, attribute of intelligence. Tahuti writing down the deeds of our life on earth as we lived here. This is where the Western philosophical thought, Greeks took their concept of Hermes Trismegistus from Tahuti, now called thought too. So we see Judaism took God Khnum, fashioning man out of clay, and called him Jehovah. But notice the God Khnum fashioning man on the potter's wheel out of clay. This is where Judaism took a portion of this to make up their Genesis story with the Sanhedrins around 250 BC. From this relief right here of God fashioning man and woman on the potter's wheel. And they took other concepts of Atum from Heliopolis creation story, or the city of On, to make up their Adam as a man, when actually it was Atum the son. And we see where European Christianity took from the goddess Isis and Horus and made up the European, again, let me express, the European version of Mary and Jesus. Copied directly from these reliefs right here. So you got Greek philosophy, where he took from Tahuti and called it Hermes Trismegistus. You got the Jehovah Genesis creation story and the Bible, where they took from Khnum, fashioning man on the potter's wheel out of clay, and they turned it into making man out of clay, Adam out of clay. And you also got Christianity right here showing Isis lactating or breastfeeding the holy child Horus, who was born of immaculate conception and virgin birth. Three concepts just from this one relief. You see? All carved in stone. As you can see the line, one dark, one light, showing where this temple was under the water. Nobody could come back and read this. And that's why over here, if you look against this wall right here, much of it, they tried to chisel it all out. But our ancestors wrote endlessly as though one day we would forget our story. One day we would not know who we are. One day that the only thing that we put on our genetic memory bank would be an alien, a conqueror's story. In our mind, our story would not be told. And that's why Justinian in the 6th century AD came in and closed these temples down, because they were copying Christianity, the theological concepts from African people. And we'll get more into that during the lecture when we have the lecture series this afternoon. I want to even go further to show you, sisters, that y'all sacred. You are goddesses. And that's the problem with the brother today, because they took that concept out of his consciousness. That's why the rap groups around there calling her the bees and stuff. Yeah. Huh? Yeah. Okay, now look. Isis holding the Ankh of life. We know what the Ankh of life now is, a symbol of her uterus, right? So here, again, I'll show you, showing where the holy child is coming from her womb. See the loop? That's why she's holding it, because she wants the first immaculate conception and the first holy birth is going to come from her. So she's holding the Ankh for life. Can you see it? Not too much glare there, right?
No,
that's why the Europeans, when Justinian and the boys Theodosius, they came in, they tried to chisel it out. Couldn't deal with the real immaculate conception, but they weren't talking about one immaculate conception. Our ancestors were telling us on these reliefs that every woman could produce an immaculate conception, provided that she was on the spiritual level and the man was on the spiritual level. The both of them coming together produced immaculate virgin birth, which means a clean birth. But notice they chiseled out the Ankh, the top part of it, because that represents the womb. But the other part they kept there to represent the crucifix. You see? That symbol that they didn't take or didn't chisel out was a symbol of the cross. They didn't chisel that one out. So this is another picture of Constantine Constantine's vision of the cross, which he is pointing to this symbol, Sec Vincius. In this symbol, we shall conquer. Through this symbol, we shall conquer. Supposedly, Constantine got the cross out on the battlefield. Another picture, but now that we know that Constantine came here, now we know where, in fact, Constantine got the cross from. Huh? Right off of your ancestor temples. Has nothing to do with, this is blowing here, has nothing to do with no crucifixion or human sacrifice. Europeans corrupted it. Now we have no understanding or meaning of what the cross means today. And chisel out the Ankh, which is a symbol for life.